This week, the White House announced that 3 common IVF drugs will be sold at more than 70% off through a new government website launching next year. The plan also pushes drug makers to boost production here in the U.S., but it falls short of the president's campaign promise for universal free coverage.
9 News medical expert Dr. Payal Kohli joins us here to talk about this issue. So first and foremost, a complicated question to start. For folks who are unfamiliar with the IVF process, kind of walk through how a cycle works, because it's multi-parts, multi-drugs.
Yes.
Walk us through how that works.
So IVF, in vitro fertilization, as opposed to in vivo fertilization, which is the natural process that happens inside the human body. So essentially what you do is you have the egg and the sperm meet in a petri dish or a test tube. So that means you have to take out the sperm, which is usually through a donation, and you have to retrieve the egg. But the way to do that is to stimulate the woman's ovaries with expensive fertility drugs, cause lots and lots of eggs to sort of mature, and then have her ovulate and retrieve those eggs using a needle and procedures that are also costly, as well as imaging tests. And then of course do the implantation. Sometimes that involves genetic testing on the embryo as well to make sure that it's healthy and stable, and then putting it back into the woman's uterus. That's called the embryo transfer. So that entire process, all the way from the stimulation to the embryo transfer, is considered one cycle of IVF.
And I think everybody kind of knows that this isn't a cheap process, but I don't know if people know just how expensive it is. We were talking during the break a little bit. I mean, what's the most expensive part?
Yep, so the entire IVF cycle costs usually one round, from $15,000 to $30,000. Okay, and that doesn't include all the post-pregnancy care. But if you look at the kind of composition of that, the fertility drugs are about $3,000 to $6,000. The actual procedures and the imaging is usually about $12,000 to $20,000. And then those genetic tests and sometimes the embryo storage, ththose can be up to $5,000 to $10,000. So putting this all together, and everyone, as we said, doesn't always succeed on the first try. So imagine multiple rounds of these at a price tag of $15,000 to $30,000. It really makes it out of reach for most Americans.
I've lived in this world myself, and I used to joke it's like Monopoly money at this point. When you start finding things that are cheaper, because they're not thousands, they're hundreds.
Right.
These particular drugs that the Trump administration is talking about, from my memory, this is more of the front-end retrieval side drug. So when women are first trying to grow eggs to be able to use for just that first step, right? What can you tell us about these drugs, and what is the Trump administration promising?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. These drugs are mandatory drugs in any kind of egg retrieval, and there's those 3 steps we talked about. So one of them is an ovulation drug that stimulates the ovaries. The other releases the eggs from the ovaries so that you can retrieve them. The third prevents premature ovulation. So you have to use them in every cycle. The cost, as I said, was about $3,000 to $6,000. So if you're making them about 70% cheaper, you're talking about an average cost savings of somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 per cycle of IVF. Now, if I told you the total price tag is $30,000, you still have a pretty high price tag.
Well, and I know people too, we mentioned, that are actually who can't afford it, are still choosing to go out of the country to get this done because it's half the price in Mexico or Spain or other places. So lowering this the way that it's going to happen, does that really make a difference, do you think?
You know, in my opinion, it's a step in the right direction, but I don't think it's going to make an impact in making this
Really?
accessible. And to your point, Alex, our country is about 270% more expensive than 25 other countries. So the idea here is that it can be done cheaper. Why aren't we doing it, especially when millions of Americans are struggling with infertility? And why is it that it's not mandatory for insurance companies to cover this? That really makes me upset, because this infertility is a medical disease just like any other. And every family should have the right to have a child, to carry a child if they want to do so, and if they're struggling with infertility.
And on the insurance conversation, it seems like we are starting to see more and more companies offering it. I'm curious if that's because it's a more widespread procedure. It's millennial women that are now in the workspace. This is a way to keep people working for you versus going somewhere else for a tech company and getting it. What are you seeing as far as insurance coverage for these, and the drug costs being covered by insurance?
Yes, I think there's a couple of trends. One is a lot of women are freezing their eggs proactively in their 20s and 30s. So we're being mindful about our reproductive life cycle because so many are struggling with infertility. But even now, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine says less than a quarter of families that struggle with infertility have insurance coverage. So yes, we're seeing a trend towards more coverage. The Trump administration has said that it's going to try to encourage more employers to cover it, although they have not said that they're going to make it mandatory. So I still don't know how much of an impact that's going to end up having. But I think for most Americans, the time to start planning your reproductive life and whether you want to have children is your 20s and 30s. Save for it. budget for it, because it may be a while before we actually start to see the insurance companies and the administration coming around covering it the way that we should.
We could do an hour on this, in my opinion, but okay. Dr. Coley, thank you very much. Appreciate you.